let's talk about how emotions can be misused, and being misused can actually be irrelevant. What we call irrelevant emotions. That's where we break it all down today. You might be wondering, like, well, how is that possible? I mean, all emotions are important, right? I mean, everything we feel is important. All emotions are important. Let's talk about it. We can look at it in a different way. If I take a needle and I prick my finger, that sensation of pain is trying to tell me something. It's saying, stay away from the needle. And emotions do the same thing. But human beings, we misuse it. And the misuse of those emotions lead to the irrelevant emotion. They become irrelevant. Now, you might be wondering, how is that even possible? The very first one I'm going to go over is an emotion that's valuable, but it can become irrelevant. When it's useful, it will be valuable. When it's a waste, you will understand its repetition and the reality behind that. So if we look at chronic guilt without any type of change or correction, it's useful when it's trying to tell you that you violated your own standard, because your identity will have things that are non-negotiable, okay? And when you violate those non-negotiables, you violate those standards, then guess what? It becomes a waste when you replay that guilt over and over and over again in your mind without changing any behavior. Then it becomes irrelevant. That's when it becomes irrelevant. That's when it becomes a waste. So in reality, if you're not doing anything to repair it or fix it, then all you're doing is pushing that guilt in your mind over and over again and punishing yourself in the form of sport. Think about it that way. Repetition, the constant repetition, the constant self-punishment. You fall into that pattern. That's where it becomes the waste when you ignore what it's trying to tell you. It becomes the waste when you replay it in your mind without changing anything. That's the very first one we come to. The second one, which also can become a misused emotion that becomes irrelevant, is envy and comparison. And we live in a comparison culture because of social media now. So it's useful when it shows you and helps you understand what you should value, because your values give you a direction that act as a compass for where you want to go in life. Then it becomes valuable. Where it becomes a waste is when you're comparing it to everyone else and you're doing nothing with it. There's no action being taken. Then it becomes an issue. Then it becomes a waste. So all it does is rerun and replay and burn this mental energy in your mind without any forward momentum or motion. It's just an instant replay over and over again in your mind. The next one is resentment. Yeah, this one's a powerful one. So it's useful when you know that boundaries were crossed. When someone crosses your boundaries, you're going to resent yourself. You might feel like you betrayed yourself. You betrayed your own values. You betrayed your own standards. Why did I trust them again? And that resentment is there. So it can cost you. If you're not holding boundaries, it can cost you resentment. And it becomes a waste when they violated it. They violated that boundary. You're now resentful. But instead of changing, instead of correcting it, instead of reinforcing your boundaries with other people, what do? It burns energy. It burns mental energy and emotional energy. And there's no forward momentum at all. So what do? Oh, let me just beat myself up. So as you can see, these are things that become irrelevant. It's valuable when you recognize it, but it becomes a waste and it becomes irrelevant at some point. So here's the deal. Let's go over anxiety. Anxiety as the uncontrollable, dealing with things that are out of your control, people that are very control-based. It's useful when it prepares you for an actual real threat, like, you have a bill deadline or something's going to happen to somebody and you have to pay attention. That's valuable and provides you with information. But it becomes a waste when you're worrying about what's going to happen, but you have no influence and no control. So the rule is, if you can't control it and you can't influence it, then you have to release. And if you can't control it and you can't influence it, maybe someone else can. Reach out to them and see what they can do. But don't try to control them. Allow them to do what they can, basically. You got to work. So the waste is when you're feeling that you're trying to control everything, you're trying to influence this. But when you start to worry about things that you can't control and you can't influence, then what happens is you start to get frustrated and upset, and it becomes an irrelevant, misused emotion. And I want you to understand that thinking harder does not equal controlling more. Like the more you try to control things in your head, you're losing sight of getting creative about what you can do and what you actually can influence. And if you can't influence it and you can't control it and someone else can't, you got to let it go. All right. Because people will hold on to that, and it becomes irrelevant when they hold on to it and they replay it in their head for months. What are you doing to your health? You're hurting your health. If we think that stress doesn't have an impact on the adrenals, I got news, something to look into for yourself. Now, let's go over regret. Regret's a big one, a very big one. This is when you have an experience, there's an event in your life, and at that point, it's useful because it teaches you what to not do. It teaches you what to not repeat for the future, okay? That's what's important about it. However, it becomes an absolute irrelevant waste when you've made the same mistake mentally in your head 500 times. In other words, you've already changed your behavior. You already understand what you need to do for the future as an adjustment, but you replay it. You replay that regret 500 times in your head. Could have did this. I could have done that. It couldn't have happened any other way because it didn't. Otherwise, it would have. And you need to replay that in your head. Okay, very important. Then we go down to the need for approval. The need for approval. It's useful when you understand that connection, how people connect to each other. You understand that as a signal. Where it's a waste is your decisions, your decision-making ability are totally guided by the opinions of the rest of the world. That everything you do is based on what everyone else thinks. That you have no self-approval and no connection to your own identity. So what do? You hand over your self-esteem and your approval to everybody else because you care about what everybody else thinks. So the reality is you hand over your self-esteem and your identity out to the rest of the world, all in the name of being liked and approved. Because what you'll do is once you buy something that everybody else has, you'll wear it to show your approval flag to the rest of the world. Not developing your own style, not developing your own identity, not having any sense of individuality. Okay, you fit into the pack, basically. After that, we can look at anger. Yeah, anger is interesting, right? It's a very interesting emotion. So where it's useful is that it helps you understand what your boundaries are and be able to defend those boundaries, understand what your non-negotiables are, and understand when those boundaries are actually necessary. Now, where it becomes a waste is when you actually are reacting to very tiny, trivial, and mundane things that are all based on ego and the triggers. So all you do is just get angry over and over and over again. Here's the deal. If it doesn't matter in a week and it doesn't matter in 4 months, then it shouldn't take ownership and buy your nervous system today. Okay, very important. That brings us over to shame. Shame as a emotion. We're talking the kind of shame that connects to the identity. It's identity-based. When we're dealing with the shame, it could be useful when there's almost none. There's almost none, or there's none in excess. It's something you can let go of, but it tells you, you recognize it. You recognize that the shame is there, but you're able to let go of it. You're able to release that. You're able to kind of approve of yourself at that point, or you understand that you've been shamed by other people, and that's a perception of that. However, when we look at the shame, when we turn that shame into a misused emotion, it looks like I am the mistake. You connect the shame to me, the identity. I am no good. I am the mistake. I'll never be anything, I made the error, right? So there's a difference between I am the mistake, I am the problem, and I experienced the problem. I experienced an error. I made an error, not I am the error. And that's the difference between the two. So what happens with this shame, is it stops you from taking any action. Okay. And this happens to a lot of people. This happens to a lot of perfectionists because of the fact that they've been shamed when they were younger in terms of their accuracy. They are made to feel bad about their mistakes when they were young. And what that did was they became perfectionists. I have to be perfect. Why? Because that's how I'm being perceived. It's how I look. I have to connect that perfectness to my identity. And it's because they've been shamed. And what tends to happen is they will straight up lock up and freeze before correcting anything. Okay. So it will stop you from taking action. Instead of, when you make a mistake, you need to correct it, identify that it's an error, understand the value in the correction, and then tell yourself that you made the adjustment and you're able to move forward and have that self-compassion for you. That's where it's important. So you can see how all of these things can be emotions that are misused and wind up being irrelevant because they're being filtered, right, through our brains. It becomes the real filter. So you got to ask yourself 3 solid questions at the very end of this episode here. Does the emotion lead to any functional action or outcome? Is there something that you actually can control or influence in some way, shape, or form? And will this matter in 1 week? And will this matter in 6 months? These are things to ask yourself. That's the bottom line. Your emotions were never there to be buried and suppressed. What you're supposed to do is understand what they're trying to communicate to you and throw away the excess bullshit so you can actually move forward in your life. And yes, I've always been that guy. I've been that guy to help people slice through their illusions. The illusions is when we're not looking at things realistically. And that is my superpower. And that is why I have the Voices of Victory channel. Have a great day. See you in the next episode. Take care.